The afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of Lincoln Middle School's music room, casting long shadows across rows of metal chairs. In the very back corner, a 12-year-old girl sat with her notebook open, doodling tiny musical notes in the margins while pretending to pay attention to the lesson. Her name was Lily, and if you asked any of her classmates about her, most would struggle to remember she was even in their class. It had been 3 months since Lily and her family moved to this small town in upstate New York. 3 months of being the new kid. 3 months of eating lunch alone in the library. 3 months of avoiding eye contact in the hallways. The move had been sudden, her parents said, necessary for her father's work. But Lily knew there was more to the story than they were telling her. There always was. Mr. Peterson, the music teacher, stood at the front of the classroom with his usual enthusiasm, trying desperately to get a room full of 6th graders interested in classical composers. He was in his 50s, with graying hair and a passion for music that had somehow survived 25 years of teaching middle school. Today he was talking about Mozart, writing dates and facts on the whiteboard that most students immediately forgot. "Can anyone tell me what makes Mozart special?" Mr. Peterson asked, scanning the room hopefully. A few hands shot up. Belonging to the kids who always raised their hands, the ones competing for teacher approval, Lily knew their type from her old school. She kept her eyes down, her pencil moving steadily across the page. Adding more tiny notes to her drawing, he was like, "Super young when he started composing," offered Tyler, a boy in the front row who played drums in the school band. "Exactly right," Mr. Peterson said, his face lighting up. "Mozart was composing music at age 5. 5 years old? Can you imagine?" The class murmured with mild interest before returning to their private conversations, passing notes, and checking the clock to see how much longer until the bell rang. Mr. Peterson sighed quietly, a sound Lily recognized. She'd heard it from many teachers before, that small exhale of disappointment. When you realize your students don't share your passion, in the corner of the room sat an old upright piano, its dark wood scratched and faded from decades of use. The school district had bought it sometime in the 1970s, and it showed every year of its age. The keys were yellowed like old teeth, and it was perpetually out of tune because the school could never find money in the budget for a piano tuner. Most students ignored it completely, but not Lily. Every single class, her eyes drifted to that piano. She studied its worn keys, the way the afternoon light hit the music stand, the small crack in the wooden panel on the right side. While Mr. Peterson talked about crescendos and time signatures, Lily's fingers moved unconsciously against her desk, pressing invisible keys in patterns that only she could hear. She missed playing more than she thought possible. In her old life, before the move, piano had been everything. Her mornings started with practice before school. Her afternoons ended with more practice before dinner. Weekends meant lessons, recitals, and competitions. Her entire world had revolved around 88 black and white keys. Now, there was nothing. Her parents had sold the grand piano before the move, saying it was too expensive and complicated to transport. They promised they'd get her a keyboard once they settled in, but 3 months had passed, and that promise remained unfulfilled. Lily suspected it wasn't really about money or logistics. Her parents wanted her to have a normal childhood, whatever that meant. They wanted her to make friends, join clubs, maybe try out for sports. They wanted her to be a regular kid instead of spending 4 hours a day at the piano. But Lily didn't feel normal. She felt incomplete, like a part of her was missing. Music didn't just flow through her, it was her. Taking away the piano was like asking her not to breathe. "Now I want you all to listen to something special," Mr. Peterson announced, walking over to his laptop. "This is one of the most beautiful piano pieces ever written. It's called Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy." He pressed play, and suddenly the classroom filled with the gentle, flowing melody. Most students continued their whispered conversations or stared blankly ahead, waiting for class to end. But Lily's entire body went still. Her pencil stopped moving. Her eyes closed. Every note washed over her like water, familiar and comforting and achingly beautiful. Her fingers began to move again, this time with purpose. She wasn't just mimicking the music, she was playing it. Her hands positioned exactly as they would be on a real keyboard, hitting every note with precision. The muscle memory was so deep, so ingrained that her body responded automatically. She could feel the weight of each key beneath her fingers, could hear not just the recording, but her own interpretation layering on top of it. When the piece ended, Lily opened her eyes and found Mr. Peterson staring directly at her. Their eyes met for just a moment before she quickly looked away, embarrassed. Had he noticed? Had he seen her hands moving? She felt heat rise to her cheeks and hunched down further in her seat, trying to disappear into the wall behind her. Mr. Peterson opened his mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. He turned back to the class and began explaining the Impressionist period in music, but Lily could feel his gaze returning to her throughout the rest of the lesson. The remaining 15 minutes of class felt like hours. Lily kept her hands firmly planted on her desk, refusing to let them betray her again. She focused on breathing normally, on looking like every other bored middle schooler, counting down the minutes until dismissal. When the bell finally rang, students jumped from their seats, grabbing backpacks and racing for the door. Lily gathered her things slowly, waiting for the crowd to thin out. She preferred it this way, letting everyone else leave first so she could walk the hallways in relative peace. "Lily, could you stay behind for just a moment?" Mr. Peterson's voice cut through the noise. Her stomach dropped. This was it. He was going to ask her about the hand movements, about why she was playing piano during his lesson. He'd probably call her parents, tell them she wasn't paying attention in class. Maybe he'd think she was mocking him or the music. She approached his desk slowly while the last few students filed out, leaving them alone in the music room. The old piano seemed to loom larger now, its presence filling the space between them. Mr. Peterson leaned against his desk, his expression unreadable. "I noticed something today," he began gently. During the Debussy piece, Lily's heart hammered in her chest. She stared at her shoes, unable to meet his eyes. "You were playing along, weren't you? Your hands, you know that piece." She nodded slightly, barely a movement at all. "Do you play piano?" he asked. It was a simple question, but the answer was anything but simple. Did she play piano? She used to. She lived and breathed piano. But that was before. That was a different life, a different version of herself that her parents wanted her to leave behind. "I used to," she finally whispered. "A little bit." Mr. Peterson smiled, the kind of smile that said he knew there was much more to the story than those 4 words. But he didn't push, didn't demand explanations she wasn't ready to give. Well, he said, "If you ever want to use the piano in here, maybe during lunch or after school, you're always welcome." The old thing could use some attention from someone who actually appreciates music. Lily looked up at him, surprised. Then her gaze shifted to the piano, and for the first time in 3 months, she felt a tiny spark of something that might have been hope. 2 weeks passed after that conversation with Mr. Peterson, and Lily still hadn't taken him up on his offer to use the piano. Every day she walked past the music room during lunch, slowing her steps just enough to peek through the small window in the door. The piano sat there waiting, always empty, always silent. But something held her back. Fear, maybe. Or the worry that once she started playing again, she wouldn't be able to stop. That all the feelings she'd been pushing down for 3 months would come flooding out through her. Fingertips. It was a Thursday afternoon when everything changed. Mr. Peterson had decided to shake up his usual lesson plan, probably because he could see the glazed-over expressions on his students' faces whenever he talked about theory and composers. Instead, he wheeled in an old television on a cart, the kind that schools had been using since before any of the students were born. "All right, everyone. Today we're doing something different," he announced, with more energy than usual. "We're going to watch and listen to something that I guarantee will blow your minds." A few students perked up at the mention of watching something instead of taking notes. The class settled down as Mr. Peterson fumbled with the ancient DVD player, muttering under his breath about technology. Finally, the screen flickered to life. "This," he said, pausing the video on the first frame, "is a recording of one of the most difficult piano pieces ever written. It's Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3. Professional pianists spend years learning this piece. Some never attempt it at all because it's just that challenging. Why? Asked Melissa, one of the girls who actually seemed interested in the class.
Well,
You're about to see, Mr. Peterson said, pressing play. The video showed a concert hall. Grand and elegant, with a full orchestra spread across the stage. At the center sat a grand piano, and behind it, a pianist whose hands began to move across the keys with incredible speed. The music that filled the classroom was unlike anything most of the students had heard before. It wasn't pretty or gentle like the classical music Mr. Peterson usually played. It was powerful, dramatic, almost violent in its intensity. The pianist's hands flew across the keyboard, stretching impossibly wide to hit notes that seemed too far apart for human fingers to reach. The speed was breathtaking. Notes cascaded like waterfalls, building and building until it felt like the music might explode. And through it all, the pianist made it look effortless. Their face calm and focused while their hands performed what looked like magic. Lily sat frozen in her seat. She knew this piece. She knew it intimately. Every note, every phrase, every impossible leap across the keyboard. She'd spent 2 years of her life working on it, slowly building up the speed and the endurance required to play it all the way through. Her teacher back home, Mrs. Kowalski, had said it was ambitious for someone her age to even attempt it. But Lily had been stubborn, determined to master one of the greatest challenges in classical piano. Her hands began to shake slightly under her desk. She pressed them against her thighs, trying to keep them still, but the music was calling to them. Every fiber of her being wanted to play along, to feel those familiar patterns under her fingers again. When the excerpt ended, the classroom erupted in chatter. "That was insane," someone said. "How is that even possible?" Another voice asked. "Their hands were moving so fast I couldn't even see them," Tyler added, looking genuinely impressed for once. Mr. Peterson smiled, clearly pleased with their reactions. That's exactly the point. This piece is considered one of the Mount Everests of piano playing. It requires not just technical skill, but incredible strength, endurance, and musical understanding. The composer, Sergei Rachmaninoff, had enormous hands. He could reach over an octave and a half, which is way more than most people. He walked to the piano in the corner and demonstrated, stretching his own hand across the keys. "See, I can barely reach an octave and a half, and I've got fairly large hands. Some of the passages in this piece are nearly impossible for people with normal-sized hands." Brandon, a boy who usually slept through class, raised his hand with a smirk on his face. "So you're saying nobody in this boring town could play something like that, right?" Mr. Peterson laughed, but there was something slightly bitter in it. "Well, Brandon, you're probably right. Our town isn't exactly known for producing concert pianists. We're lucky if we can fill the school band each year. I bet nobody in this whole school could even play one page of that," Brandon continued, encouraged by the laughter from his friends. "Probably nobody in this whole county." "You're probably right," Mr. Peterson agreed, shaking his head. "This kind of playing requires years and years of serious study, usually starting from a very young age. It's not like learning to play guitar in your garage. This is a whole different level." He paused. Then a playful expression crossed his face. "You know what? I'll make you all a deal. If anyone in this class can play even just the first page of this piece, it's the opening minute, I'll give you an automatic A for the entire semester. No tests, no homework, just an A." The class burst into laughter. It was obviously a joke, a challenge that Mr. Peterson knew was completely safe because there was no way any middle school student in their small town could possibly meet it. "Yeah. Right?" someone called out. "Easy A, here I come," another student joked, making exaggerated piano-playing gestures in the air. Even Mr. Peterson chuckled at his own challenge. "I'm serious. The offer stands. If any of you can play that opening page with even half the skill of what we just watched, you'll get an A, but I'm not worried about having to follow through on that promise." The conversation moved on, students already forgetting about the challenge as Mr. Peterson started, explaining more about Rachmaninoff's life and the historical context of the piece, but Lily heard none of it. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her palms were sweating. That piece, that impossible piece that Mr. Peterson was using as an example of something unattainable, was something she could play. Not perfectly, maybe not as brilliantly as the professional in the video, but she could play it. She'd performed it twice at recitals back home. The rest of the class passed in a blur. Lily's mind was racing. Should she say something? Should she take him up on the challenge? But that would mean revealing everything she'd been hiding. It would mean standing up in front of the class, being seen, being noticed. The quiet new girl would suddenly become the center of attention. More than that. It would mean her parents finding out she was playing again. They'd made it clear they wanted her to take a break from the intense pressure of classical piano. They wanted her to have friends and hobbies and a normal life. If she did this, if she played in front of everyone, word would get back to them. Small towns were like that. Everyone knew everyone's business. But as the bell rang and students filed out of the classroom, Lily remained in her seat. That music was still echoing in her head, the notes as familiar as her own heartbeat. She'd given up so much when they moved. She'd left behind her teacher, her piano, her entire identity. She'd tried being invisible, tried being normal, and what had it gotten her? 3 months of loneliness and a constant ache in her chest. Mr. Peterson was erasing the whiteboard when he noticed Lily still sitting there. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Lily stood up slowly, gripping her backpack strap so tightly her knuckles turned white. She walked toward the door, then stopped. Without turning around, she spoke so quietly that Mr. Peterson had to strain to hear her. "That challenge you made, about the Rachmaninoff piece?" "Yes." "Is it still open?" Mr. Peterson looked confused. "Well, sure, but Lily, that was just a joke. That piece is impossibly difficult." "I didn't mean to, I know," she interrupted, finally turning to face him. "I know how difficult it is. I want to try." For a long moment, Mr. Peterson just stared at her. Then he saw something in her eyes, a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, just hidden. "You're serious," he said slowly. "It wasn't a question." Lily nodded. "Do you understand what you're asking? This isn't like playing chopsticks or a simple song. This is one of the most challenging pieces in the entire classical piano repertoire." "I know," Lily repeated. "Can I try or not?" Mr. Peterson studied her for another moment, then sighed. He wasn't sure what was happening, but something told him this quiet girl was full of surprises. "Okay," he said finally. "Tomorrow. Lunch period. You can use the music room and the piano." "But Lily, I don't want you to feel pressured or embarrassed if I'll be here," she said simply, and walked out of the room before he could say anything else. After she left, Mr. Peterson stood alone in the empty classroom, staring at the old piano in the corner. He had a strange feeling that tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her fingers moving through the patterns of Rachmaninoff's concerto in the darkness. It had been 3 months since she'd touched a real piano. 3 months since she'd felt the weight of keys beneath her fingertips. What if she'd forgotten? What if her hands had lost their strength, their speed, their precision? The piece required stamina that took years to build. Could she still do it? Around 2 in the morning, she finally drifted off. And in her dreams, she was back at her old piano, the beautiful Steinway grand that her parents had sold. She was playing the concerto for an audience of shadowy figures. The music poured from her like water from a fountain. Endless and pure. She woke up with her alarm, feeling exhausted but strangely calm. Today was the day. There was no turning back now. School crawled by at an agonizing pace. In each class, Lily watched the clock, her stomach twisting with a mixture of excitement and terror. By third period, word had somehow gotten around. Apparently, Brandon had overheard her talking to Mr. Peterson and had immediately told everyone he knew. The quiet new girl was going to try to play the impossible piano piece. "Is it true?" Melissa whispered to her in history class. "Are you really going to play that crazy piece from music class?" Lily nodded, not trusting her voice. "But that's like professional level stuff," Melissa continued, her eyes wide. "Do you actually know how to play piano?" Before Lily could answer, their history teacher called the class to attention, but she could feel eyes on her for the rest of the period. Curious stares from classmates who'd barely noticed her existence until now. By the time lunch period arrived, Lily's hands were shaking. She grabbed her lunch bag from her locker, but knew she wouldn't be able to eat anything. Her stomach was tied in knots. She made her way slowly through the crowded hallways toward the music room, each step feeling heavier than the last. When she turned the corner, she stopped dead in her tracks. The music room wasn't empty. Through the window in the door, she could see at least 20 students crowded inside. Some were sitting on desks, others standing along the walls. Brandon was there with his friends, looking smug and entertained. Melissa and several other girls from her classes had claimed spots near the front. Even a few 8th graders she'd never spoken to had shown up. Mr. Peterson stood near the piano, looking worried. When he spotted Lily frozen in the hallway, he quickly came out to meet her.
Ow.
"I'm so sorry," he said quietly. "I don't know how a word got out. I can send them all away if you want. You don't have to do this, especially not with an audience." Lily stared through the window at all those faces. This was her worst nightmare. She'd spent 3 months trying to be invisible, trying not to be noticed, and now half the school was gathered to watch her. Her first instinct was to run, to pretend she'd been joking, to disappear back into the safety of being nobody. But then she saw the piano. That old, beaten-up upright with its yellowed keys and scratched wood. It wasn't the beautiful instrument she'd learned on, but it was a piano. And she'd been silent for too long. "It's okay," she heard herself say. "I'll do it." Mr. Peterson studied her face. "Are you absolutely sure? There's no shame in, I'm sure." He held the door open for her, and Lily walked into the music room. The chatter died down as everyone turned to look at her. She kept her eyes on the piano, focusing on it like a lifeline. Her legs felt weak as she crossed the room, but she forced them to keep moving. "All right, everyone, quiet down," Mr. Peterson said, his teacher voice cutting through the whispers. "Lily has agreed to attempt the challenge I mentioned yesterday. I want complete silence and respect. This is extremely difficult, and she's being very brave to try this in front of all of you." Brandon snorted. "This should be good." "Brandon," Mr. Peterson said sharply, "one more word and you're out. I mean it." Brandon held up his hands in mock surrender but couldn't quite hide his smirk. He and his friends were clearly expecting a disaster. Some entertainment to break up their boring lunch period. Lily reached the piano and stood there for a moment, just looking at it. She adjusted the bench, sat down, and placed her hands in her lap. The room was so quiet she could hear people breathing. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, then another. In her mind, she heard Mrs. Kowalski's voice from hundreds of lessons over the years. "The music is already inside you, Lily. The piano is just how you let it out. Don't think about the notes. Feel them." Slowly, Lily raised her hands and positioned them over the keys. Her fingers found their starting positions automatically. Muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice guiding them to the right places. She could feel the coolness of the keys, could sense the weight of them even before pressing down. And then she began to play. The opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 rolled out across the music room, and everything changed. The first chords were deep and powerful, announcing themselves like a challenge to the world. Lily's hands moved with absolute certainty, stretching across the keys in the wide intervals that the piece demanded. The whispers stopped. The smirks disappeared. Every single person in that room went completely still. Lily's fingers flew across the keyboard, attacking the rapid passages with a speed that seemed impossible. Her small hands somehow managed the enormous stretches, her fingers landing on exactly the right notes even as they blurred with motion. The old piano, usually so out of tune and tired, sang under her touch. She drew music from it that no one knew it was capable of producing. The piece built and built, growing in intensity. Lily's whole body was engaged now, swaying slightly with the music. Her face transformed from the shy, withdrawn girl everyone knew into someone else entirely. Someone fierce and powerful and completely in control. She attacked the dramatic passages with stunning force, then shifted seamlessly to moments of incredible delicacy. her fingers dancing lightly across the keys like rain on water. Mr. Peterson stood frozen near the door, his mouth hanging open. He'd taught music for 25 years. He'd heard student recitals and school concerts and everything in between. But he'd never, not once in his entire career, heard anything like this. This wasn't a middle school student stumbling through a difficult piece. This was the real thing. This was concert-level playing. The other students seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. Melissa had tears streaming down her face without even realizing it. Brandon had lost his smirk entirely, staring at Lily with an expression of pure shock. One of the 8th grade boys had his phone out recording, his hands shaking so badly the video would be almost unwatchable. The music filled every corner of the room, spilling out into the hallway beyond. Teachers in nearby classrooms stopped their lessons, hearing the impossible sound coming from the music room. A few stepped out to investigate. Joining the crowd gathering outside the door, Lily was lost in the music now, completely absorbed. Her eyes were closed, her face peaceful, despite the intensity of what her hands were doing. This was where she belonged. This was who she was. For 3 months, she tried to be someone else, tried to fit into a normal life that didn't fit her at all. But here at the piano, she was finally home. The first movement built to its explosive climax. The notes cascading like an avalanche. Lily's hands raced across the keyboard in the final runs, her fingers moving so fast they seemed to be in multiple places at once. And then, with one final, thundering chord, she finished. For a long moment, there was absolute silence. Lily kept her hands on the keys, her eyes still closed, breathing hard from the exertion. Playing the piece had taken everything she had. Every ounce of strength and focus and emotion, and then the room exploded. Students jumped to their feet, applauding and cheering. Some were whistling, others shouting. Melissa was openly crying now, clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Even Brandon stood up, looking like he'd just witnessed something he couldn't quite process. The teachers who had gathered outside rushed into the room. Adding their applause to the noise, Mr. Peterson had his hand over his mouth, his eyes wet. He was trying to say something but couldn't seem to find words. Lily finally opened her eyes and looked around at the chaos she'd created. All these people, all this noise, all this attention, focused entirely on her. It was everything she'd been avoiding for 3 months. And for the first time since moving to this town, Lily smiled. A real, genuine smile that lit up her entire face. The applause seemed to go on forever. Lily sat at the piano bench, her hands still trembling slightly from the exertion, trying to process what had just happened. She'd played. After 3 months of silence, she'd finally played again. And it had felt like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. Mr. Peterson was the first to reach her. And when Lily looked up at him, she saw tears streaming down his face. He didn't even try to hide them. "How?" he managed to say. "How is this possible? Who are you?" Before Lily could answer, students swarmed around the piano, everyone talking at once. "That was incredible. Where did you learn to play like that? Can you teach me? Do you know any other songs?" The attention was overwhelming. Lily felt herself shrinking back, the same instinct to disappear that had kept her invisible for months. But Mr. Peterson noticed and quickly stepped in, raising his hands for quiet. All right, everyone, give her some space. The bell's going to ring in a few minutes anyway. Back to your lunches or your next classes." He used his teacher authority to gently herd students toward the door. Though they kept looking back at Lily with amazement and curiosity, Brandon stopped at the door. Looking back with an expression Lily had never seen on his face before, something like respect, maybe even awe. "That was actually amazing," he said quietly, then left before she could respond. Soon it was just Lily and Mr. Peterson in the music room. He pulled up a chair and sat down beside the piano, shaking his head in disbelief. "Lily, I need you to help me understand what just happened. That wasn't beginner playing. That wasn't even intermediate. That was conservatory level, professional level. How long have you been playing?" Lily looked down at her hands, still resting on the keys. "Since I was 3. My grandmother was a piano teacher. She started teaching me before I could even read regular books." The Rachmaninoff. "How long did you work on that piece?" 2 years. My teacher back home, Mrs. Kowalski, she said I was too young to attempt it, that my hands weren't big enough, and I didn't have the stamina. But I really wanted to try. Lily paused, a small smile crossing her face at the memory. She finally agreed to let me work on it if I promised to go slowly and not hurt myself. Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. Mrs. Kowalski. Do you mean Alina Kowalski? From the Manhattan Conservatory? Lily nodded. Good Lord. She's one of the most respected piano instructors in the country. Lily, why didn't you tell anyone about this? Why have you been sitting in the back of my basic music class when you're clearly beyond anything I could possibly teach you? The question hung in the air. Lily had known it was coming, had known she'd have to explain eventually. She took a deep breath. My parents wanted me to have a normal life. Back home, everything was about piano. I practiced 4 or 5 hours a day, sometimes more. Weekends were competitions and recitals. I didn't have time for friends or sports or anything else. My whole life was just piano, piano, piano. She ran her fingers along the keys without pressing down. I loved it, but it was also exhausting. The pressure was constant. Every competition mattered. Every recital had to be perfect. When we moved here, my parents saw it as a chance for me to be a regular kid. So they asked you to stop playing? Not exactly. They said I could take a break, try other things, see what else I might enjoy. They sold our piano before we moved. They keep promising to get me a keyboard, but somehow it never happens. I think they're scared that if I start playing again, I'll fall back into that same intense routine. Mr. Peterson was quiet for a moment, processing this. And how do you feel about that? About taking a break? Lily's eyes filled with tears, surprising herself. I hate it, she whispered. I've tried to be normal. I've tried to be interested in other things, but nothing feels right. It's like there's a huge, empty space inside me where the music used to be. When I heard you play that Debussy piece in class, and then when you showed us the Rachmaninoff, it was like something woke up that I'd been trying to keep asleep. Your parents? They don't know you're here right now, do they? They don't know you played today? Lily shook her head. They're going to find out, though. In a town this small, word travels fast. As if on cue, there was a knock on the music room door. Principal Hendricks stood there, a strange expression on her face. She was a stern woman in her 60s who ran the school with strict efficiency, not someone who usually showed much emotion. Mr. Peterson, may I speak with you for a moment? She glanced at Lily. You too, dear. He followed her out into the hallway, where a small crowd of teachers had gathered. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Roberts from science. Even Coach Williams, who usually wanted nothing to do with the arts. Is it true? Principal Hendricks asked. Did this young lady just play Rachmaninoff's third concerto in our music room? Mr. Peterson nodded, still looking dazed. The first movement. Perfectly. I've never heard anything like it. Not from a student, not from anyone. The principal turned to Lily, her stern expression softening slightly. How long have you been studying piano? 9 years, ma'am. And you've been in our school for 3 months, sitting in basic music class, and you never mentioned this talent? Lily didn't know how to answer that. How could she explain that hiding her talent had felt safer than revealing it? That being invisible had seemed easier than standing out. Principal Hendricks must have seen the uncertainty in Lily's face, because her expression softened even more. I'm not angry, dear. I'm amazed. And I think we need to have a conversation about how this school can better support your education. But first, we need to call your parents. Lily's stomach dropped. This was the moment she'd been dreading. Her parents were going to be upset, disappointed that she'd broken the agreement to take a break from piano. They were going to see this as her falling back into old patterns, choosing music over everything else again. Please, Lily said quietly. They wanted me to be normal. They didn't want me to be the piano girl anymore. They're going to be so disappointed. Principal Hendricks knelt down so she was at Lily's eye level, something the stern woman probably hadn't done in years. Lily, I'm a mother myself, and I can tell you that no good parent wants their child to hide their gifts or dim their light to be normal. May have thought they were protecting you. But after what I've heard about what just happened in that music room, I think they need to know the truth. You can't hide who you are, sweetheart. and you shouldn't have to. 20 minutes later, Lily sat in the principal's office while Principal Hendricks called her mother. She could only hear one side of the conversation, but she watched the principal's face carefully, trying to gauge how angry her mother was. "Mrs. Chen? This is Principal Hendricks from Lincoln Middle School." No, Lily's not in trouble. "Actually, I'm calling because something quite extraordinary happened today." There was a pause. "Yes, it involves the music program. Mrs. Chen, did you know your daughter can play piano at a professional level?" Lily couldn't hear her mother's response, but she saw Principal Hendricks's eyebrows rise.
I see.
"Well, she just performed one of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire in front of students and staff, and I'm told it was absolutely remarkable. I think you and your husband should come to the school. We need to discuss Lily's educational needs." Another pause. "Yes, this afternoon would be perfect." "Thank you." She hung up and looked at Lily with a kind expression. Your mother sounded surprised. "She's going to be upset," Lily said quietly. She sounded more shocked than upset. "And Lily, sometimes parents need to be reminded that their children are individuals with their own dreams and talents. You're not doing anything wrong by being exceptional at something." The afternoon felt endless. Lily went to her remaining classes, but she couldn't focus on anything. Teachers looked at her differently now. Students whispered and pointed. Some came up to congratulate her. Others just stared. The video that the 8th grader had taken was already spreading through the school, shared from phone to phone, despite the rules against phones in class. When the final bell rang, instead of heading to her locker, Lily made her way back to the principal's office. Her parents' car was already in the parking lot. Her heart pounded as she opened the office door. Her mother and father sat in chairs across from Principal Hendricks's desk. Mr. Peterson was there too. When her mother saw Lily, she stood up quickly. Lily braced herself for anger or disappointment. Instead, her mother crossed the room and pulled Lily into a tight hug. "Why didn't you tell us?" her mother whispered. "Why didn't you tell us you were still hurting?" And just like that, Lily started crying. All the feelings she'd been holding in for 3 months came pouring out. Her father joined the hug, and for a long moment, the three of them just stood there while Lily cried out all her loneliness and frustration and sadness. Finally, when she could speak again, Lily looked up at her parents. "I tried to be normal. I really tried. But I can't. This is who I am. Music isn't something I do. It's something I am." Her father wiped tears from his own eyes. "We know, sweetheart. We've always known. We just got scared. We saw how much pressure you were under, and we wanted to protect you. But you can't protect me from being myself," Lily said softly. Her mother smiled through her tears. "No, I suppose we can't." The meeting in Principal Hendricks's office lasted over an hour. Lily sat between her parents, listening as Mr. Peterson and the principal discussed options for her education. The small school didn't have advanced music programs or the resources for someone at Lily's level, but they wanted to help. They wanted to find a way for Lily to continue growing as a musician while still being a regular kid at their school. "There's a piano professor at the university 2 towns over," Mr. Peterson said, leaning forward in his chair. "Dr. Richard Chen. He's semi-retired now, but he still takes on a few exceptional students. I could reach out to him, see if he'd be willing to meet with Lily." Lily's mother looked uncertain. "We left the conservatory specifically to get away from that kind of pressure. I don't want Lily falling back into a schedule where piano consumes her entire life." "It doesn't have to be that way," Principal Hendricks said gently. "Students can be exceptional at something without sacrificing everything else. We could work out a schedule where Lily takes lessons once or twice a week, practices in our music room during free periods, but still has time for friends and other activities." "What do you want, Lily?" her father asked, turning to look at his daughter. "Not what we want, not what your teachers want." "What do you want?" It was the first time anyone had asked her that question in a long time. Lily thought carefully before answering. I want to play piano. I need to play piano. But I also want to have a normal life sometimes. I want friends. I want to go to movies and hang out and do regular kid things. I just don't want to have to choose between music and everything else. Can't I have both?" Her father squeezed her hand. "I think that sounds perfect." Over the next few weeks, things changed rapidly. Dr. Chen agreed to meet with Lily. After hearing her play, he immediately offered to take her on as a student. He was a kind man in his 70s with gentle eyes and an understanding of music that reminded Lily of Mrs. Kowalski. He agreed that lessons twice a week would be plenty, and he never pushed her to compete or perform unless she wanted to. Lily's parents bought her a beautiful digital piano that fit perfectly in their living room. The first night it arrived, Lily played for 3 hours straight while her parents sat on the couch listening, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, but always supporting her at school. Everything was different too. Lily was no longer the invisible girl in the back of the class. Students said hello to her in the hallways. Teachers stopped to chat with her. She was invited to sit with different groups at lunch. Some kids wanted to be her friend just because she was suddenly famous in their small school. But others seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. Melissa became her first real friend. She wasn't interested in piano or music particularly, but she liked Lily for who she was. They started eating lunch together, studying together, laughing together. Lily learned that Melissa loved horror movies and was obsessed with her pet rabbit and wanted to be a veterinarian someday. Normal kid stuff, the kind of friendship Lily had never had time for before. Mr. Peterson's music class became Lily's favorite part of the day, though not because she was learning anything new. Instead, Mr. Peterson asked her to help teach sometimes. She showed younger students proper finger positioning, helped them understand rhythm and timing, and occasionally played examples when Mr. Peterson was explaining different musical styles. He treated her like a colleague rather than just a student, and it made her feel valued in a way that competitions never had. The video of her playing Rachmaninoff had spread beyond the school. Someone's older sibling had posted it online, and within a week it had been viewed thousands of times. Local news stations called asking for interviews. The regional newspaper wanted to do a feature story. Lily's parents were protective, turning down most requests. But they did agree to one interview with the local paper. The article came out on a Sunday. With a photo of Lily sitting at the old upright piano in the school music room, the headline read, "Hidden Prodigy, 12-year-old stuns small town with concert-level performance." The article told her story, about leaving the conservatory, trying to be normal, and finally revealing her talent. It was strange seeing her life written out like that, like she was someone special rather than just a girl who happened to be good at piano. The article caught the attention of someone Lily never expected. 2 weeks after it was published, she got an email from Mrs. Kowalski, her old teacher from the conservatory. Lily's hands shook as she read it. "Dear Lily, I saw the article about you and watched the video of your performance. I cannot tell you how proud I am, not just of your playing, which was magnificent, but of your courage. You've found a way to be true to yourself while also protecting your well-being. That's something many adult musicians never learn. Please know that you will always have a place in my studio if you ever want to return. But it sounds like you found exactly where you need to be. Keep playing, but more importantly, keep being yourself. With love and admiration, Mrs. K." Lily read the email 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She'd been so worried that her old teacher would be disappointed in her for leaving the conservatory, for choosing a simpler life. Instead, Mrs. Kowalski understood. She approved. She was proud. The following month, the school held its annual spring concert. Usually it was a modest affair with the school band playing simple pieces, and maybe a few solo performances from students brave enough to stand on stage alone. But this year, Mr. Peterson had something special planned. The auditorium was packed. Students filled the front rows while parents and community members crowded the back. Lily peeked out from backstage, her stomach doing flips. She'd performed dozens of times before, in competitions and recitals, but this felt different. These people weren't judges or strangers. They were her classmates, her teachers, her neighbors. They were her community. The school band performed first, playing a medley of popular songs with enthusiasm, if not perfect precision. The audience clapped warmly. A few students did solo performances, including Melissa, who sang a pop song that made everyone cheer. Then Mr. Peterson walked onto the stage. For our final performance tonight, we have something very special. 3 months ago, I didn't even know this student could play piano. Now it's my honor to introduce someone who has reminded me why I became a music teacher in the first place. She's shown me that true talent can hide in the quietest places, waiting for the right moment to shine. Please welcome Lily Chin. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Lily walked onto the stage, her legs steadier than she expected. She sat at the grand piano the school had borrowed for the concert, a much nicer instrument than the old upright in the music room. She adjusted the bench, took a deep breath, and looked out at the audience. Her parents sat in the third row, holding hands. Her mother was already crying. Her father gave her a thumbs up. Melissa sat with a group of friends, all of them grinning and waving. Mr. Peterson stood at the side of the stage, his face full of pride. Dr. Chen was there too in the back row. Having driven over an hour to see her perform, Lily placed her hands on the keys and began to play. But she wasn't playing Rachmaninoff tonight. She wasn't playing anything complicated or technically impressive. Instead, she played Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece that had started everything, the piece that had first made. Mr. Peterson noticed something special about the quiet girl in the back of his class. The music flowed through her, gentle and beautiful and full of emotion. She wasn't playing to impress anyone or win any competition. She was playing because she loved it, because it was part of who she was, because it made her happy. The pressure was gone. The fear was gone. There was just the music and the moment, and the pure joy of sharing something beautiful with people who cared about her. When she finished, the audience rose to their feet. The standing ovation went on, and Lily stood at the piano, bowing and smiling, feeling more herself than she had in months. She'd found her way back to music, but on her own terms. She was the piano girl again, but she was also just Lily, a regular kid with friends and a life and a future full of possibilities. Mr. Peterson joined her on stage, laughing and clapping. He leaned in close, so only she could hear. "You know, you still owe me that automatic A," he said with a grin. Lily laughed. "I think I've earned it. You've earned so much more than that. Thank you, Lily. Thank you for reminding me why music matters." Later that night, after the concert ended and the auditorium emptied out, Lily's parents took her out for ice cream. They sat in a small shop on Main Street, eating sundaes and talking about the performance and about the future. "Are you happy?" her mother asked simply. Lily thought about the question. She thought about the piano waiting for her at home, about Dr. Chen's lessons in Mr. Peterson's class. She thought about Melissa and her other new friends, about being just another kid at school who also happened to play piano really well. She thought about the freedom to choose music without letting it consume her entire life. "Yeah," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "I really am." Her father raised his ice cream spoon in a toast to finding balance, and to our incredible daughter who taught us that being normal is overrated. They clinked spoons together, laughing in the warm spring evening. Outside, the small town moved at its